Welcome back. And now we take a look at all the lawyers in this and questions about Rudy Giuliani's pro bono work for Donald Trump, an unusual arrangement. Back in the 1990s, there were lawyers for Bill Clinton who asked the Government Ethics Office if he could use a similar pro bono approach. They said, no, not ethical. We have that detail thanks to brand new reporting by my next guest, Hunter Walker, White House correspondent for Yahoo News. His new piece is about who pays for the president's lawyers and why working for free can be so problematic. And another legal expert, obviously in her own right, Melissa Murray, back at the table. Good evening, everyone.
Hey.
Hey.
Hunter, what did you find?
So I worked on this story with my colleague Lupe Lupin, and basically we started by trying to ask a pretty fundamental question. Who is paying the president's legal team? And what we found out is that we don't really know. Rudy Giuliani had two words when I asked if he's working pro bono. Yes, sir. Jay Sekulow, the president's other top lawyer, would not comment at all on his payment structure. And this raises a lot of questions because, as you pointed out, in the Clinton impeachment, which is really the only prior example of this, because there were a new landscape of ethical regulations that came up after Watergate. So really, Clinton is all we can compare this to. And they went to the Office of Government Ethics for consultation on their setup. Jay Sekulow told me, I don't deal with that. I'm not a government employee. He didn't get this consultation. And so, we don't have any of the safeguards that the Clinton team put in place. And it raises a lot of questions for legal experts we spoke to, because the worry here is that in giving free legal services to the president, which Rudy Giuliani says he's doing, you could potentially, be giving him a valuable gift that exposes him to undue influence. And then in the case of Jay Sekulow, where we really don't understand his income streams, other people, outside interests, could be coming in and trying to influence these people who are close to the president and providing him with services.
As you reported out this story, did Paul Manafort's name ever come up or loom large, given that he oddly worked for free during the campaign, which, again, in and of itself was not illegal, but he ultimately was convicted of many crimes that relate to the same kind of corruption that made people question why someone who was in debt and worked so hard to travel around the world trying to make money was suddenly interested in working for free.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're absolutely right that Paul Manafort is a good example of sort of the risks and questions we should be asking when someone's trying to work for the president. And Bill Clinton's story also provided an example of, evidence that, outside interests and unsavory figures might use the legal team to try to get close to the president. In his case, with the consultation of the OGE, they set up a trust. And this banned foreign donations. It capped donations at a maximum, and only individuals, corporations, and other groups couldn't donate. And they still,
as reported, they still had issues with foreign influence getting in there. Melissa, how do you view this?
Well, again, the question, and this is the question the Office of Government Ethics will have, is the question of undue influence and whether or not you can actually track all the money coming in. That was the issue for the Clintons. They had to put everything into a legal trust. They had the trust capped at $1,000 contributions, and they still had problems with Chinese investors, whether or not there was improper influence coming in. That's a question here. And the question with Rudy Giuliani, I think, is even more complicated. Right now, Rudy Giuliani is going through a quite acrimonious divorce with his third wife, Judith Nathan. And there have been suggestions from other media outlets that part of this pro bono fee structure is perhaps to make a claim that he doesn't have the same kind of income that he might have had that would be available either for spousal alimony or for property distribution in that divorce. So there are two different areas of law that are being fielded here. There's the question here with regard to presidential authority and the legal profession and ethical question. And then there's this question about the family law portion of this. And they're actually overlapping in this case.
Hunter, ultimately, did you find anyone that didn't want to get into this at all with you, or everyone was pretty responsive, even if their response was, hey, I'm not telling you where I get my money?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you said, Jay Sekulow would not give us any details on that. Rudy Giuliani did not respond to a lot of detailed questions about the ethical issues surrounding his pro bono thing. But I think a really important point is that this is not necessarily illegal. The OGE has non-binding rules, and we saw the Trump team brush this off when they reprimanded Kellyanne Conway for violating the Hatch Act.
Well, and as you say, attempted collusion isn't always indictable either, but we're way past just those disparities or those distinctions, and people are now asking, well, what's the kind of conspiracy that people don't want being had hatched in the Oval Office, which is
We're
part of
clearly
where we're
very
at.
deep in a murky gray area.
Yeah,
I'll say that.
Hunter Walker, Melissa Murray, my thanks to both of you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.